Hello, welcome back everyone. We will continue our agenda, but before that, since we are in Bali and we've been talking about learning and developing, now let us learn a little bit of Balinese language. I'm pretty sure if you're Indonesian, you probably have heard this, but if you're non-Indonesian, maybe this is going to be the first. But let's start with the common greetings in Bali. When you meet someone in Bali, you can say, Om Swastiastu, and you have to do this with your hand. Oh yeah, it's pretty much the same there as well, yes. Amazing. And that person will reply with the same sentence, which is Om Swastiastu. Now let's say it together. Ladies and gentlemen, Om Swastiastu. Beautiful. And next, if you want to ask somebody how they are, you can say Punapi Gatra, Punapi Gatra. And it means how are you? You can answer with Becik, Becik. Can you do it? Becik, Becik. Yes, so now I'm going to ask you, Punapi Gatra? Amazing. Okay, let's give a big round of applause to all of us right now. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we will continue our agenda with the symposium. And this symposium will be led by Deputy CEO Professional Resources of the Australian Council for Educational Research, ACER. The Professional Resources Division supports the work of educational professionals and educational organizations by providing tools which support practitioners to collect, analyze, and understand evidence of learning and research-based products and services to address identified needs. We invite convener of the symposium, Deputy CEO ACER, Mr. Rolf Suburn, PhD, and also all presenters of the symposium. Professor Pauline Taylor-Guy, Research Director, Centre for School and System Improvement, ACER. Mr. Summer Xia, British Council Country Director for Indonesia and Director for Southeast Asia. Dr. Claire Scholar, Principal Research Fellow, ACER. Mr. Jarrod Hingston, School and ECE Services Director, ACER. And Mr. Bahrul Hayat, PhD, Head of Indonesian Educational Assessment Association. And I leave the floor to the convener.
Thank you, and thank you, everyone. Welcome to what is going to be a very interesting session, and I hope you all enjoy the session and are ready to ask some questions of our very distinguished panel, which we'll save for the end. So we've been hearing over the last 2 days just how governments and education systems all around the world understand that in order to achieve their ambitious goals for system transformation, they must increasingly understand their education system as a system. So today's symposium is focused very much on helping us understand how we can align those different parts of the education system so that they are working together to address and achieve our significant challenges and goals for system transformation. So each of our distinguished panellists today will be speaking both about one aspect of the learning system, curriculum, teacher education, assessment, learning, but also about how these aspects of our education system are part of an entire system, a learning system, which must be aligned in order for us to meet our challenging goals. And we're going to start with an introduction from our distinguished guest, Professor Pauline Taylor-Guy. Professor Taylor-Guy is Research Director for the Centre for School and System Improvement at ACER, and she is going to address the topic of system-wide commitment to improving learning. Pauline.
Just need to work out the technology and to know how I'm going to advance our slides. Thank you. Thank you. Perfect. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. It gives me great pleasure to be the first speaker in this symposium, which is focused on aligning curriculum, learning and assessment. As Ralph has said, I lead ACER's Centre for School and System Improvement, and over the last 4 to 5 years, our work has focused on building evidence about system transformation thinking and practice in partnership with national governments and within country educational jurisdictions in Australia and internationally. And these include, I should have probably started with our symposium overview, but these include, countries such as in the Middle East, as the United Arab Emirates, in Brunei, in Papua New Guinea, and numerous Australian jurisdictions. And as a wholly independent, not-for-profit research organisation, our mission is to improve learning across the lifespan. So our team, in partnership with education jurisdictions, is building the evidence base, conceptual frameworks, tools, and local capabilities across the different components of a coherent learning system so that every learner learns successfully and is well prepared for learning in life. Our approach is grounded in a view of learning that sees all students able to learn successfully when enabling conditions are in place and sees improvement as essentially about day-to-day practice in the classroom, with a focus squarely on the learner. We know from our work and our interactions with our colleagues internationally that although our contexts might be vastly different, the challenges we face are quite common. So I just wanted to point out some of the projects and initiatives we currently have or have recently completed in terms of our global reach. These initiatives address different elements of a learning system, including teacher education. That was certainly some of the work we've done in Myanmar, along with standards for school effectiveness. In Papua New Guinea, we've looked at revising curriculum, major curriculum reviews in the GCC region in the UAE, but also strategy projects and building career progression models to attract, retain and develop high-quality teachers. In Brunei, also looking at curriculum review, and in Australia, multiple different projects with multiple jurisdictions, often focused on school and system improvement using some of ACR's evidence-based tools. So a bit about our work then. Our approach is framed around Jeff Masters' learning system model, which is presented in his book, which we've already alluded to yesterday, from a study of the five of the world's top performing education systems. And this work was commissioned by the NCEE Washington in the USA. As you can see, the learning system comprises 6 interrelated components that work together dynamically: a supportive learning system, strong leadership of learning, comprehensive student support, quality curriculum, highly effective teaching and informative assessment processes. And in this symposium, I and my colleagues will be looking further at 3 of these components, those with the red circles around them, and the alignment of curriculum, pedagogy and assessment. An important point is we know from evidence that while the design of each of these components is important, it's how these elements work together as a coherent whole which drives improvements in learning. Mark earlier referred to layers of complexity in this endeavour, and I think one of the aspects of the work that we are really learning and engaging with is just the amount of layers and how we need to deal with those layers in each individual context. So let's move to another way of conceptualising that cohesion. Whereas Jeff's model talks about those interrelated pieces working dynamically, This conceptualization from Senge and Winthrop from the Brookings Institution really thinks about that alignment in the form of 3 Ps, where you've got a really clear idea around the purpose of your system, on purpose of learning, a strong focus on the pedagogy, and the 3rd P being position, which is really around that alignment of system components to support what they call the pedagogical core. So just a moment to talk about the pedagogical core, because it's relevant to this symposium too. By the pedagogical core, they mean that focusing system efforts needs to be squarely and sharply on the interrelationship between curriculum, pedagogy, and assessment, with the student really at the centre. So I'm just going to share and do a bit of a sprint through some findings that we have from our work about what's important. As Ralph introduced, system transformation needs to be approached from a systems thinking standpoint, and a recognition that whereas, as I've said, the design of each of the elements in the system is important, the alignment between those components and how they work dynamically is what leverages transformation. Second, there needs to be a clear shared vision of the purpose of schooling, underpinned by shared values across stakeholders, which acts as a rallying point. Evidence suggests that this is one of the main functions that an education system can play to mobilize all stakeholders in their commitment to this vision and support its implementation. Third, any educational system transformation needs to align and focus on the pedagogical core, as I've mentioned. At the heart of the system-wide commitment to improving learning must be a sharp focus on the pedagogical core and that tight alignment. In a student-centered approach, or in student-centered approaches, there are implications about how curriculum is developed and designed and implemented. There are implications about teachers' pedagogical practice and assessment practices. There are also implications for the role of student voice and perspectives in all aspects of the pedagogical core. And some of the work that we've been doing recently, we've actually captured student voice in some of those elements of transformation that we've been tasked with, sometimes for the very first time. System transformation needs to be informed by evidence. In more mature systems, or perhaps more effective systems, system-level data or evidence is used to ascertain how the system can better support schools and learners, rather than focusing on individual school or regional performance or student performance. This requires a move from an orientation from top-down accountability to using system-level data, including student performance data, to inform system-level initiatives to support schools and teachers better meet the needs of their learners. Typically, when we work with systems, we pay a lot of attention to really gaining a deep understanding of the current state, the context in which the system is working. And we try and do that from the perspective of multiple stakeholders, as I've said, including learners themselves. We draw from a broad range of evidence in the way we approach this, and a mixed method research, a robust mixed method research approach in trying to ascertain a deep understanding of what's currently happening. Effective learning systems demonstrate a deep commitment to successful learning for all learners, regardless of their starting points. And in particular, high-performing systems focus on strong early learning and early intervention and support. This necessarily means high-quality teaching and teaching at the right level. When we're talking about, I'm just going to come here. I'd like to cut now to one of the key elements of just dive a little bit deeper into some of those findings. We can't understate the importance of teaching quality and school leadership, and that's one of the areas in which we've been working around evidence bases and developing conceptual and implementation frameworks. We need to have an unrelenting focus on building and sustaining leadership capability in high-quality teachers, and this involves enhancing their capabilities elevating their professional status, and addressing workforce challenges. In many areas of the world, there are teacher shortages. I know that that's not the situation in Indonesia, but certainly enhancing teacher capabilities and elevating professional status is relevant in this context. This is not an easy enterprise. I know there was discussion before about what was simple around developing teachers. This is not an easy enterprise at all. But if we're going to really contribute to more equitable and resilient systems, we need to pay attention to engaging the profession to innovate by using high quality research, by looking at what is practical in terms to scaling evidence-based approaches and transcend, provide supports that translate solutions and support reforms to learning systems within the context that, in which we're operating. So if we were to conceptualize our overall approach, we would be looking at our, this model. So we draw on research to identify international good practice, perhaps benchmarks of international good practice as points of reference. We engage with stakeholders to get their perspectives. We use that comprehensive evidence that we gain through mixed method research approaches to think about the design of the approaches or the interventions that we're thinking about. These would be based on key principles and evidence-informed and focused on all learners. Critical to system transformation practice is embedding monitoring and evaluation processes throughout the development and the implementation. So it needs to be embedded, and we need to monitor and evaluate the right things. And then, of course, if we're looking at implementation and scaling, a key issue is sustainability. You might be able to have the best intervention, but if it can't be sustained over time, then that's going to impact on our ability to transform systems over the long time. And the two dark blue areas about maturing intervention and knowledge building are really what we learn within a particular context about how those principles and that research plays out. So we're talking about contextualized learning and contribution to system transformation practice. And some of those practices can transcend a particular context, but they are also very situated in that context. So in summary then, what would we say? Vision and values are really important. Alignment and cohesion is critical. We need to garner the perspectives of stakeholders and keep on garnering those perspectives if we are going to implement vision and values, our aims for an education system. We need a deep understanding of the current state, a focus on the pedagogical core. We need to think about the design of learning system elements, particularly as they impact on the pedagogical core. We need to focus on capability building at all levels of a system. We can't just focus on teachers. Who's going to be able to support the teachers? Who is going to be able to guide and make policy decisions? So that capability building is really important at all levels. We need to attend to teacher quality across the career span. We need to embed monitoring and evaluation processes right from the outset and use those dynamically to be informing design principles and implementation. And all of those are important for supporting sustainable implementation. So, thank you. I've just provided an overview there of some of the elements around system transformation, and I'm going to pass over to my colleague, Summer Xia, here to be able to explore a part of teacher quality. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Pauline, for that excellent introduction and overview of system transformation. We will now hear from our next distinguished panellist, Summer Xia, who is the Country Director, Indonesia, Southeast Asia Lead for the British Council. And Summer will be talking to us about teachers' continuous professional development as one element in a learning system. Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much, Ralph. Selamat siang. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're not falling asleep after lunch. So this is the hardest session, so bear with us. My name is Summer Xia. I'm the Country Director of the British Council in Indonesia and Director for Southeast Asia. The first thing I want to say is a huge thank you to ACER for the ICAL conference. So Miriam, congratulations, well done. Can we have a round of applause, please? Now, ACER is a long-term partner for the British Council because research is really important for us. So, and coming to the topic today, I want to talk about the effective continuing professional development, specifically for the teachers and how important that is as a catalyst to successful alignment and implementation of curriculum, learning, and assessment. Now, for me to understand my audience, do we have teachers in the room? Can you raise your hand? Yeah, we have some teachers. What about school leaders? Okay, good. What about policymakers? Excellent. Okay, we have some of the key players in this journey, so this should be highly relevant and of great interest to all of you. So let me start now, and if that works. Okay, press hard. I will tell you a little bit about the British Council, in case you don't know, and our approach to the effective CPD, how that aligns curriculum, learning, and assessment, and some research we have done, and further discussion. So the British Council, have you heard of the British Council? Raise your hand. Excellent, that's better than I thought. So we are the UK's international organization for cultural relations and educational opportunities. Our mission is to support peace and prosperity by building connections, understanding, and trust between the people in the UK and countries worldwide, including here in Indonesia. We were set up in the UK in 1934, which means this year we're celebrating the British Council's 90th anniversary worldwide. So we're here for the long-term benefits of development. Where do we work? So we work in 3 areas primarily: education, English language, arts and culture. So education, it's about improving the education system from basic education to higher education, working with governments, civil society partners, teachers, educational institutions to look at how we can improve learning for all. English language, we look at the learning, assessment, and teaching of English language and using as a tool to enable people, especially young people, to thrive in the 21st century. And arts and culture, where we see the transformative power of arts and culture to connect our people across borders and also respond to global challenges such as climate change, inclusion, and innovation. So, focusing on our work in education, especially basic school education and English language, coming to the conference today, these are the themes that we identify globally, which are of great interest to the government. So, language in foundational learning, especially English in the multilingual world, English in education, English as a medium of instruction, the quality of our teaching and our teachers, school leadership, and girls' education in particular, as we identify the gaps, and life skills for young people in the 21st century, and of course, how we respond to crisis, displacement, and migration in today's world. How do we do that? These are the 4 types of activities of our intervention. Policy engagement, how do we work to convene policymakers to have policy conversations, meaningful discussions on the development of policy and what will be best for that country, that environment in particular. Research and insight, so as I mentioned, ACER and many other research organizations are strong partners for the British Council because we want everything we do to be evidence-based. Capacity building, we have bespoke programs for practitioners, for teachers, to look at their professional development. And finally, technical assistance, where we provide technical advice for development of assessment, curriculum, and resources. So, moving to the focus of my presentation today, I want to talk about our approach to effective CPD. To start with, I want you to look at the diagram on the right-hand side. So this is from Dr. Barry O'Sullivan, the British Council's leading assessment expert, who champions that the 3 elements, curriculum, delivery, and assessment, by the way, delivery is teaching and learning, are really intersecting and supporting each other to form a comprehensive learning system. Therefore, we recognize the essential role that CPD plays, both in terms of the initial teacher education, pre-service training, and also the ongoing CPD, in-service training, so that we can facilitate successful teaching, learning, and assessment that will determine and influence the students' learning outcomes. To back it up, we have done the research in partnership with Curie from the UK with the title Exploring Principles of Effective Continuing Professional Development for Teachers in Low and Middle Income Countries, which produce 12 key principles as essential for ensuring effective CPD. And let me tell you a little bit more about these 12 principles, especially for lower resourced countries. So I don't know if you can read them, it's a bit small, but the slides will be shared. Let me just talk you through very quickly the 12 key principles coming out of this research. The first one is really about responding to the aspirations of students, teachers, and the whole school system. Second one is about teachers' enablement in pedagogy, practice, understanding of content and theory, and in connection with each other. Why certain things work, why certain things don't work. Number 3, CPD is a shared responsibility between program providers, usually the school or the ministry, the participants, the teachers themselves, and also the environment, their community, their schools, so that we can all take a focus on the students' achievements and well-being. Number 4 is about strengthening teachers' professional identity and professional growth, as well as their knowledge and skills. And number 5 is about valuing specialist expertise, teachers' own expertise, subject expertise, and expertise about the community of the participants. Number 6 is about combining iterative, evidence-rich CPD and including assessment for learning for teachers. Number 7 is about encouraging our school leaders to champion and model CPD. And number 8 is about a deeper understanding of teachers' knowledge and skills, but also what drives them, their motivation, their identity, and their practice. Number 9 is about allowing peer support, exploratory dialogue to identify new practices and how students could respond to the ongoing changes in today's world. Number 10, this is about allowing participants to explore their habits, assumptions, and beliefs so that we can disrupt the status quo and think about innovation. And number 11 is about achieving sustainability by ensuring participants integrate best practice and new approach in their day-to-day teaching. And finally, we need to make sure participants have access to high-quality tools and resources for teaching and learning that are relevant, so that include some smart tools enabled by modern-day technology. So let me now give you an example how these principles have informed us in our trial with the Ministry of Education in Indonesia. The background of this is that the Ministry of Education in Indonesia has reintroduced English language as a compulsory subject this year from grade 3 and above. We need to make sure the English language teachers in the schools level will be ready, and we're talking about 180,000 teachers across this country. So how do we start? Well, we came up with a trial together with the ministry, guided by the key principles that I just highlighted. So there are 3 core activities in this journey. We started with a teacher professional development landscape review. So we need to understand what is ongoing already, the current opportunities and initiatives, and consult a wider community, those who have an interest in teacher professional development, and also think about the bigger questions, how they became a teacher, how to become a better teacher, and perspectives from other ELT experts. Then we move on to the needs analysis, so identifying and describing the current CPD provision for primary and secondary school teachers in English, and also analyzing the professional development needs of these teachers and evaluate some of the ongoing practices, including those piloted by the British Council, and make recommendations that will inform the design, delivery, and evaluation of a teacher CPD program that can be scaled up and sustained for a country this size. So the first two interventions are guided by principles 1 and 8 from the previous slide, as you saw. And then we move on to the actual trial, which is an online CPD for the teachers and teacher educators, also guided by a number of the principles I highlighted before. So this saw us providing online CPD for almost 500 teachers, which included self-access learning, community of practice live sessions, and also practical assignments so that they can immediately test what they learned from the program. And also hybrid capacity development for 34 teacher educators. So this is train-the-trainer model so that we have the moderators and master trainers for future programs so that the intervention is sustainable and scalable. What do we hope to achieve through that intervention? So within the 4 boxes here, I think we can divide them into the short-term benefits and the long-term outcome. So then in the short term, in the first 2 boxes, we hope that through the effective CPD, underpinned by and addressing the principles mentioned earlier, the teachers will improve their knowledge and skills, but also enhance their confidence as a result, which will then enable them to plan and deliver more effective teaching, learning, and assessment in the classroom. So that is then measured in the short term through the monitoring and evaluation system we put in place. But we're also interested in the long-term benefits. So over time, such interventions should lead to improved students' learning and achievement of learning outcomes, setting the curriculum, which hopefully will then contribute to the ultimate goal of preparing skillful and competitive school graduates who can go on to become confident citizens in today's world, interested in the opportunity to access lifelong learning through the English language as an enabler and be the change maker we need for the future of this country and also the rest of the world. So, and also I'm pleased to highlight how in this process, as you can see, monitoring evaluation is so key. We're pleased to have ACER on board to help us with the needs analysis and also the evaluation of the overall program. So that, I hope, gives you an idea of how we are translating the key principles from the research I shared with you into a real trial with real context in Indonesia to help the teachers improve so that they can teach better, be happier, with more confidence, and millions of students will be able to benefit from that. And also build that habit of CPD as a lifelong learning process. So to finish, I will give you the research I mentioned. So I only highlighted the 12 key principles, but you may want to scan the barcode so that you will be able to download this report and read more about how we would advise conducting continuing professional development for teachers in your school, in your community. And I'll finish there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Summer, for that brilliant presentation. We have heard over the last 2 days about the importance of teacher professional development, particularly as we try to transform our education systems to address these big challenges of preparing students better for the 21st century. But we've also heard that teacher professional development in isolation can sometimes not be as effective if you have other parts of the system that are working in opposition to that teacher professional development. We want teachers to have the skills and understanding of how to develop student higher order thinking, capabilities, collaboration skills, communication, critical thinking. But what about the other parts of the system? So we are now going to hear from Dr. Claire Sculler, who is a Senior Research Fellow at ACER. Oh, I'm sorry. We are now going to hear from Dr. Jarrod Hingston, who is the School and Early Childhood Education Services Director at ACER. And we're going to hear about how we need to think and rethink about how assessment connects to learning and supports For example, our improvements in teacher professional development. So Jarrod is going to speak to us about enhancing students' achievement through the assessment of learning progression. Thank you, Jarrod.
Thank you, Ralph. Selamat siang. It's wonderful to be here in Bali. Some of my colleagues and I have actually been spending this week working with schools in Jakarta, and it's so wonderful to be in a country with so many forward-thinking, passionate educators. And so today I'm going to talk a little bit about, this is tricky, this one, isn't it? There we go. So I'm going to sort of follow on a little bit from what Pauline was talking about around the systems approach. But I have the privilege of leading a very passionate team of people at ACER who take a lot of the work that our brilliant researchers do and we package them into services that schools and in particular systems in Australia and internationally can use to help improve their systems, to be able to help improve assessment and most importantly, the pedagogical core that Pauline was talking about. We support teachers to be able to make students the centre of their assessment and be able to demonstrate what progress looks like for every single student. So we're going to focus a little bit on how we do that today. But first of all, when we're talking about systems, it's really interesting with the work that we do because we work with 43 systems in Australia. A lot of people internationally think one country, one system. No, there's a lot of different systems, a lot of different contexts that we work with, and I think we do a pretty good job of helping them all show that every student can actually make progress and to be able to make the progress of the student a very, very central piece of the classroom every single day. Now, one of the first things that we always talk about when we do meet with teachers, and just sort of following on from Pak Summer, we do a lot of professional development and professional learning with teachers. And the first thing that we always talk about is the purpose of assessment and the purposes of assessment, making sure that there's clarity around what we're actually trying to achieve. And there's various aspects and challenges to that. The first thing, I apologise, any of you have probably seen me present before, have seen this because I've been using this for about 15 years. But the first piece is to make sure that we bring fairness and equity into assessment. And that can mean so many different things in different contexts, in different system contexts, different school contexts, even different classrooms. Also, a balance of the types of assessment. So there's many different ways that assessment can be conducted. We know one of the most effective ways is classroom observations. Teachers are assessing students constantly. Do they understand this concept? How are they actually listening to this class? But there's also other types of approaches to assessment that we support schools and teachers to deliver that have fairer and very important outcomes for that pedagogical core. The use of technology is something that is constantly coming up more and more. You know, are we using technology in assessment for the sake because we've got this technology, or is it actually helping us? And one of the things that we are finding more and more with the work that we do is that we can use technology to get results to teachers faster so they can actually start working with the students in their areas of need immediately. And one of the big pieces as well that we'll talk a bit about today is the communication of achievement. So this is something that can be so often missed, and students at particular achievement levels are sometimes missing out on actually understanding the progress that they're actually making. So what we do, we work with systems to help teachers make better evidence-based decisions about the learning needs of every single student. Now, to be able to make those evidence-based decisions, no single assessment is going to give the complete picture. And often, different assessments don't quite measure the skills and the concepts that are necessary to get that complete picture. So what we do, we try to work with systems and schools and teachers to get that full picture and to be able to understand what progress actually looks like long term. Now, there are different approaches, and the most typical approach and we received this during the week in Jakarta. A lot of the schools we're talking about is, how do these students compare? What are their standards against grade 4 level or grade 5 level? Now, we know that a lot of the assessment going on in classrooms is really focusing on that grade levels curriculum, and there's certainly a place for that. But what we tend to do is to say, is this student at grade 4 level, or are they ahead of grade 4 level? Are they behind grade 4 level? How do they compare with their classmates? But we're not necessarily understanding learning as a continuum. But we know that in whatever the learning area is, there is a lifelong learning journey there. So any learning area, if we make sure that we're not just treating it as discrete to a particular grade level, but taking a helicopter view of that particular learning area and understanding that there is a learning journey there, we start to understand a little bit more about the different learning trajectories of students. So some of our students who are the really high achievers, we get to actually understand how high they're achieving and what they can do and what their next steps in that particular learning area are. For the students who might be struggling with that particular grade level curriculum, they may have foundational concepts from 2 or 3 years ago that they haven't quite grasped. How do we find that out if we're only just looking at that grade level curriculum? So if we start to take that learning journey view and acknowledge that learning is not discrete to a particular grade level, but it is actually a lifelong journey, we can actually start to understand students' learning needs and their progress a lot better. And this is where we start to make students the centre of that pedagogical core. So ACER's approach, now I know we've been talking a lot today about throwing psychometricians under buses and things like that. We definitely don't want to do that, because they really, we have some wonderful researchers who take these mathematical models and work with our test developers to develop really great instruments that we can actually be able to run point-in-time assessments that can actually monitor progress and understand where students are at in their learning over time. But one of the key things that we're not about at ACER is just about a test score. What we're really passionate about is being able to understand where a student is at in learning and translate that back into the classroom and what it actually looks like for learning in the classroom. What we can also do is see that learning can be measured over time. So when we talk a bit about the student-centred part of assessment, is we can actually take our tools and help teachers to be able to measure progress over time. Now, a lot of assessments tend to look at, and when we talk about those normative comparisons where students are actually being compared with progress of other students, there's actually a lot of understanding about what progressing in achievement is actually being missed by students. So what we have in this particular example, this particular figure, we have examples of students' progress over a number of years from grades 1 to 10. And what we've actually highlighted here is the average student. So generally the average student will go year on year in the classroom receiving results that indicate that they're an average student. Now, if you're told every single year you're an average student, that's probably not going to be as thrilling as being shown actually how far you're progressing year on year. Now, it's tools that are developed that can actually communicate that level of achievement that is an expertise that we have and something that we work very closely with systems around. We call these tools learning progressions. So and this is what one of our colleagues, Colin, mentioned earlier this morning, how they're applying learning progressions in the international context. But we also apply that approach within the services that we provide to schools on a daily basis. What we do is we focus on helping teachers understand what students can actually do, where they're actually at in their learning currently, what their next steps in learning are. And that's different for every student. And then being able to identify improvement over time. So being able to reflect back on what progress has every single student made. And now this is a really important part of well-being as well. For students who are that average student who may be struggling in the classroom, to be able to communicate to them, actually, this is what you've achieved over the past 12 months. You were able to do this, now you're able to do this. We also know that high achieving students, they can be a challenge in the classroom. Nothing is harder than a mischievous high achieving student who might be bored in the classroom. So being able to appropriately challenge students. Now, the way that we use our learning progressions is being able to describe levels of achievement across that learning journey. So that's being able to measure what they're actually able to do and where they are against that learning progression, but also to be able to communicate to the student what types of skills that they're actually able to demonstrate now and where we want to get them to next. So at ACER, we call this our progressive achievement approach. So we do work very closely with systems and with schools in classrooms around, the first piece is the evidence gathering. So for us, the assessment is not the big thing. It's an evidence gathering tool. We don't want teachers to just assess students and then take a score and say, okay, we'll come back to that. What we actually want them to do is to treat this as a piece of evidence and some data that they can then make decisions around the next steps in learning. And of course, then be able to reflect upon the progress that every single student has been making. So this is a very passionate part that we're very passionate about at ACER. Now, when we go back to that idea of communicating achievement, we're not just about numbers, we are actually about relating that back into the classroom. And one of the pieces that we do work very hard on is being able to provide reporting that has both quantitative and qualitative aspects. So this idea of throwing psychometricians under the bus does not need to happen because they work really well with our educational researchers who take the measurement aspects and then can describe what that learning looks like into the classroom. And in this particular case here, we're actually able to provide instant reports back to teachers where they can actually see where are our students actually at in that learning progression. And at a particular level, what does that actually mean in this domain? We also provide that information at the individual level. So what we do understand is that assessment is a social science. It's not an exact science. Students are people, so they're not always going to follow the typical description of what progress looks like. But what we do is empower the teachers to be able to understand where that student may actually be at and how they may be more advanced in certain aspects of that learning progression, or where they actually may need some immediate support in relation to what that learning progression says that they should be able to do at that level. So again, this is something that we are also very much involved in that professional learning space. And what we're actually aiming to do is to work with teachers to see the students progress from one level to the next and to be able to communicate that progression back to all of the students, no matter what their achievement level is. We also support teachers to be able to understand at the classroom level what achievement and progress looks like and what their learning needs are. And again, being able to provide that data back immediately is a very important part of what we do. So just to show that this is not just a theoretical piece, but we also do have these services that we provide to hundreds of schools around the world every year, including in Indonesia and in a lot of countries in Asia. So some of your schools may be using the International Schools Assessment. Others may be using Progressive Achievement for International Schools. We've also developed one, and we had a great question in the previous symposium about local contexts and cultural contexts. we do put a lot of effort, time and effort into meeting those local needs as well. And one of the ways that we've done that in Indonesia recently is to develop a progressive achievement assessment in mathematics, which is actually delivered in Bahasa Indonesia. So we are very passionate about the learning progressions approach. We're very passionate about supporting systems and schools and teachers to enhance that the role of assessment in that pedagogical core, and to make the student the central piece of learning and assessment in the classroom. Terima kasih, thank you very much. I'll hand over to the next speaker.
Thank you, Jarrod. So we need effective assessment processes to enable us to inform teaching and learning. We need to also think about the kinds of things we are assessing. If we are only assessing subject, curriculum information, not recall of knowledge and process, then this is the feedback that we're giving to teachers and learners. So we need to be thinking more broadly as we transform our learning systems to support the kinds of learning we want to see that will prepare young people for their future in the modern world. We need to start thinking more broadly about the kinds of assessment and assessment tools that we provide teachers and systems in order to be driving the kinds of teaching and learning that we want to see. So our next presenter, Dr. Claire Skula, is a Senior Research Fellow at the Australian Council for Educational Research, and she's going to talk to us today about assessing and aligning essential skills. Thanks, Claire.
Thank you, Ralph. As Ralph says, I'll be looking at discussing with you the alignment and assessment of what we're calling essential skills. Thank you for those that came to the workshop on Thursday. We had some really interesting discussions, lots of questions answered, but a lot more questions still to address. I'm going to give you a little bit of a background about how we got to where we are in our thinking around essential skills. So apologies to those who were in the workshop. A couple of these slides might be familiar to you, but I promise we'll get to some unique content as well. So this was a real exercise we conducted with 6 countries in a workshop in Southeast Asia, creating a word cloud through asking the participants what were the skills that they deemed to be most important for students in the 21st century. And what we can see here is a large number of skills being covered. And this leads us to highlight a problem that we've identified with the so-called 21st century skills space, is that unfortunately that term has become somewhat of a dumping ground for anything and everything that is not of specific learning area academic focus. Now, it's not to say anything on this slide is not important. We certainly believe that everything on this slide is important. The problem we're being faced with, though, is that it's just not reasonable to place all of the focus, all of these skills, dispositions, attributes, values of focus into the classroom. And it's certainly not necessarily fair nor possible to expect our teachers to be able to be trained and deliver teaching to the extent of on all of these skills, attributes, and dispositions, as well as the academic content that they're expected to deliver to the students. So what our focus has been on is somewhat of a narrowing as to what are the high impact essential skills for learning and for life beyond school and education as well. The other thing that we identified is that some of these constructs that are identified in this slide are not necessarily skills. They may be more dispositions and attributes that tend to fluctuate with time or mood. And so what we're really focusing on is skills, things that we can nurture, things that we can grow over time in a classroom environment. One of the other issues that we identified is that there is a large number of frameworks And of course, each organization, each education system has the right to prioritize whichever skills that they feel are most valued in their education system. But what we've identified is that while a lot of work has gone into the production and formatting of the skill frameworks, there isn't necessarily always the carry-through right the way through to the classroom. So while we have quite a lot of policy and documentation around what the skills are of priority within an education system, for many systems, it doesn't actually then resonate at the classroom level in terms of how we're nurturing and teaching those skills, and certainly not how we're evaluating, assessing, or monitoring those skills over time. What we conducted then was a series of steps in order to conduct that narrowing of focus. One of the things we did was focus groups with teachers in a number of countries, where we asked them what skills they felt that they were actually already working with, perhaps not focusing on necessarily, but already felt had some sort of presence in their classroom at the moment. And also what skills they felt they had some knowledge in. We also did a review of the frameworks, it's many, many more than what I just shared, to see what were the consistent skills appearing across and within those frameworks, across different education systems and organizations, to see what the key priorities were. And finally, we conducted a review of several studies, including the one on this slide, to look from a workforce perspective. What are the key skills in demand from the workforce? And of course, as is the nature of these types of studies, and by the time they get published, they're almost out of date because the workforce continues to move on. But we can see from this slide the priorities that we're seeing. This particular study was a gathering of demand from job advertisements. So we can see things like communication, problem solving, collaboration are very much in high demand. So from there, that led us to identify 5 essential skills: self-regulation, creative thinking, collaboration, critical thinking, and communication. And what we believe these 5 skills to be is the 5 skills of most high impact and what we deem to be essential for learning, but for life as well. And we can almost visualize these set of skills as somewhat of a resource kit or a toolbox that we can equip students with to prepare them for life. Now, we had some additional set of criteria for narrowing these down, one of which I've mentioned already, which was that they have to be a skill, something that may fluctuate depending on context, but generally has an upwards trajectory. So from that sense, these identified constructs need to be and should be able to be understood from a growth perspective. The idea that we can nurture these, they're some sort of onward pathway, some sort of upward trajectory, we can see progress in these 5 skills. The other criteria is that they need to be measurable. We need to be able to understand these skills in an observable way. We need to be able to create assessments that allow students to demonstrate their skills in each of these areas, and we need to be able to do so in somewhat of an objective and consistent way across contexts. And lastly, the skills need to be teachable. We need to be able to foster these skills and nurture these skills in students. We need to be able to identify pedagogical strategies and interventions that we can embed within existing learning outcomes. So these were the 5 skills that we believe that fit those criteria, as well as the accumulation of knowledge from the aforementioned studies. And some of you might be thinking, well, there's some things in our priorities list that aren't included in this set of skills. Something like resilience came out as a very strong interest area or aspiration across education systems particularly during the pandemic. But we can see that we can build resilient learners through, say, creating more self-regulation in our students, their ability to persevere. Persevere with problems, persevere with tasks in learning and in life. Also, if we're able to teach students how to think more creatively about solving problems, manipulate ideas, pull particularly challenging problems apart and think of them from different perspectives, then we're building more resilient learners and more resilient citizens. So we're tackling resilience through the development of this skill toolbox. Similarly, well-being is a huge focus across education systems globally at the moment. And again, well-being really draws on these social-emotional learning elements of our students. And we have a lot of social-emotional elements within our skills framework here. Communication and collaboration being huge social aspects. If we can think about the skillful elements of communication and collaboration, we're building those social skills in students. And similarly with emotional regulation, in terms of self-regulation, we can be building that emotional control, that appropriate emotional management within students and within our learners. And lastly, citizenship is one big one that comes up, and it's certainly something that we're also measuring through our CPLM assessments as well. And one of which is of interest. How can we nurture and create excellent local and global citizens? Again, having students be able to think more critically about the information that they're gathering, the information that they're receiving, the information that they're providing to others, as well as working with others in collaboration very, very effectively, makes us better at engaging with our communities more regionally and more globally as well. So these are primary skills that can then have secondary effects on some of the broader skills as well. What we've done then for each of these skills is create a skill development framework where we're going one step further than those surface level frameworks in terms of defining the skills. Now, the initial feedback that we had, excuse me, the initial feedback that we had actually thought we would receive from teachers was that they'd want something very basic, very simple that they could easily integrate. So almost like a summary statement for each of the skills. In fact, when we presented these really detailed skill frameworks to the teachers, this was actually the preferred option for them. So these were really well received, fortunately. So what we have is really detailed descriptions about not just strands, but then subsequent aspects. And it's actually these aspects you see that we're focusing on in the teaching and the assessment. So instead of walking into the classroom and the teacher saying, today we're focusing on critical thinking, in fact, they might be focusing more on being able to teach students how to justify an argument, or justify how they might know something, or justify their opinion. Or we might be teaching students how to discriminate between different information or different sources of information. How do they identify what might be a biased perspective contained within information? How might they identify assumptions and motivations that are in information? So we're basically breaking the skills down into more manageable bite-sized chunks that then teachers can have more of a clear targeted focus on. The concept of these frameworks is that they're presented as generic in nature. That's to say that they are not specifically tied to a learning area as they're presented here, nor to a specific curriculum, deliberately so that they can go across. They can be a common terminology. So if we can think of these frameworks being used not just by a single teacher, but by all teachers across learning areas in a school, suddenly we have a more effective and efficient way of working because we are using the same aspects, the same terminology with all teachers across subject areas within a school. And if we can think then across an education system, if we have all teachers, all schools using the same terminology, the same language, then we are going to have a more of a sustainable approach to that integration of the skills. At a very aspirational level, if we had the same terminology globally to describe these skills, not just the definitions, but how they progress, we can monitor them and develop them over time collectively, then we're all speaking the same language, literally. However, having said that we have these generic descriptions, it's not really much use to just think critically or to think creatively or to think about working with others. We need to actually apply that to some sort of context. So we need to embed these skills into the learning area contexts. But again, using the same aspects, the same language to do so provides us that consistent approach across learning areas. So Jarrod was talking about levels of progression, and we've taken the same approach here with the skills. We have levels of skill development, various levels depending on the skill that we're focusing on. But the focus for us here is not to provide scores for each of the skills. Our focus here is on providing, in terms of assessment, providing opportunities for students to demonstrate their skills, and providing opportunities for teachers to observe, measure and monitor those skills over time in a qualitative way. We are not at this stage interested in benchmarking students to any fixed level at any particular age, stage or grade. We don't know the natural maturation of these skills, so it'd be really unfair for us to have any set expectations in that regard. But for us, it's, Jeff was talking yesterday about continuous growth, and this idea that the growth continues beyond the concept of just year cut-offs. And context will matter. As we become more expert in specific subject areas, we can apply the skills and perhaps increase our ability to apply the skills if we have a stronger knowledge context. So we want those skills to continue to grow across learning areas within and into the real world as well. Jeff was also talking about holistic development across the system, and we've taken a very similar approach here with the skills. We need to see them in learning outcomes in the curriculum. We need to see them as criteria in our assessments, and we need to have clear teaching strategies for teachers so they have that pedagogical core to work with. And unless we have this alignment across all of these three different areas of the system, then we're not going to have a sustainable approach to move forward. A lot of systems have worked these skills into some of their curriculum. Some countries are working on assessment. Very few countries so far are actually focusing on pedagogical training, either at in-service or pre-service levels. So that's something that we're really keen to be focusing on. We have done a large amount of work with a number of countries in the last 3 years, where we've applied this aligned model, where countries have developed their own needs analysis around what they've already conducted versus what they want to conduct in regards to skill integration. Just a number of the countries we're working with there. The nice thing about this work was it allowed us to test and validate what I mentioned before about the applicability of these frameworks across systems. So all of these countries have engaged with our frameworks, and many of them are now using them, which was really great validation for us that they would be able to work across contexts. We've conducted a bit of curriculum auditing with countries. What a number of countries came to us and were asking was, we feel like we have embedded the skills into our learning outcomes, but we're not sure how this is going to connect with teachers. And so we've done a bit of work in terms of auditing the presence of skills across different learning areas. And so what a number of countries have concluded off the back of some of this work is that the explicitness with which the skills are contained in the learning areas in the curriculum is not to a sufficient extent, or not there to a sufficient extent that teachers then know what to do in the classroom in that regard. So some of that connection, again, from what's written in the curriculum compared to what teachers are having to do in the classroom to move these skills along, it needs still more connectivity. So from an assessment perspective, we have a number of approaches. We really need to be thinking about multiple pieces of evidence and bringing those together. So we do have some more efficient assessments that we're calling them for critical thinking and creative thinking, open-ended response type items. The nice thing for us about some of that work was seeing how we might go about measuring creative thinking and critical thinking, not just generally, but within different subject areas. Again, applying those aspects across subject areas. So what I'm showing you here is just the sort of blueprint for our critical thinking assessment. We had 40 items targeted to grades 6, 8, and 10. And you can just see the spread of the items here. So what we were really pleased about was that we're able to pick up all of the aspects in our framework, which in fact we hadn't thought we might be able to do. But I'm just going to move very quickly through the last slide. What we are potentially most excited about at this stage is our problem-based learning work. Now, as I say, we have measured the skills in multiple ways, so I'm not advocating necessarily that PBL is the only way to measure these skills. But what we're finding is that it's very amenable for measuring these skills. When students work in a problem-based learning environment, they have to apply the skills that we've mentioned, our essential skills. So we have specific task focus for each of our 5 skills within this same problem-based learning assessment. And we've been taking so far a bit of a plug-and-play approach in that you can insert any problem-based learning scenario into our assessment. And we have a consistent set of tasks, consistent set of rubrics that all map and align to the learning progressions for each of the skills. And so again, what we've been doing, working within schools, is helping teachers create their own curriculum-based assessments for each learning area, but each teacher in each learning area has the same assessment. It's just tailored to their particular curriculum content at any given time. So that's been really interesting work, and I think what we're focusing on now is building this onto a new online platform over the next 12 months. So that we can pick up some of that data more readily. But what I want to emphasize with this is that this is not actually just an assessment. It's an opportunity for teachers to embed the teaching and assessing of the skills in their classroom. So these are very much classroom-based assessments. So it not only then becomes a teaching resource, it is also a learning resource. And what we want to do is not just use the data from the assessment, but we triangulate that somewhat with self and peer assessment. Now, we know that self and peer assessment is really low reliability, usually, so it's not the accuracy of the self and peer assessment that we're interested in, but in fact, it's the raising of self-awareness in students that encompasses the process of the self and peer elements of the assessment. So using the same frameworks that we've just mentioned, we have student-friendly versions of those, we have student-friendly versions of the learning progressions. So students are engaged in the learning themselves. You know, when they go into the science classroom, they know they're going to learn about science. When they go into the classroom now, we want them to know that they're being taught about critical thinking and collaboration and so forth. So engaging the students with the learning progressions, with the frameworks, allowing them to self-reflect, peer reflect, and taking that into account, allows for an element of explicitness with the students, allows for the same language to be used between students, within teachers, and at school level, and allows for that self-agency as well, for the students to engage in their own learning of the skills. I've gone a little bit over, sorry, Ralph. Thank you, I'll wrap up there.
Thank you so much, Claire. So interesting. So, we have heard about evidence-based approaches at a system level for understanding, benchmarking, unpacking and designing system transformation. We've heard about the importance of teacher professional development in transforming learning systems. We've heard about the need to rethink how we use and apply assessment evidence to understand learning as progress. And we've also heard about some exciting new ways of thinking about broadening the nature of the evidence that we're collecting about student learning and reporting on it in a way that allows teachers and students to develop those general capabilities and skills. So that's a lot, but our next speaker, Dr. Barul Hayat, who is the head of Indonesian Educational Assessment Association, HEPI, has taken up the challenge of summarising for us the challenges and issues of the multifaceted alignment of curriculum, learning and assessment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, Salam Kebajikan. There are two choices for me. As the last speaker, whether you want to wrap up the whole content and outline of the previous speaker, or I want to add some more. So, but the topic given to me is the alignment of curriculum, learning, and assessment. And Bu Yanti is here, Director of the Assessment Center, and my colleague from the ministry. So if we look at Indonesia, so Jarrod, we have one unified system. Which one is easy? One system like Indonesia or multiple systems like in Australia? So by constitution, Indonesia should implement one integrated national system encompassing various levels from preschooling, early childhood education up to higher education, for formal to non-formal, from between quad, general to religious education. That is why Indonesia implement national education standard. We have a lot of standards, and also the curriculum for primary and secondary education, and requiring all school, madrasa, and all alternative learning system. We call package A, package B, package C. This is alternative learning system in Indonesia. They should comply with all these standards. But here is the standard given by the law. Education law in Indonesia put 8 standards. My colleagues from Indonesia understand this one. But there are 3 layers of standard. The first one is graduate competency standard. And we have content standard, we have process standard, and also assessment standard. And then the third layer is the input and the actor outside the student. We have the standard for teaching and non-teaching staff, standard for facilities, infrastructure, and standard for financing, and also the management. The question is, where is the curriculum? We are talking here about the alignment of curriculum, learning, and assessment. So by education law, the curriculum is the legal document as a translation of all these 4 layers, the 4 first standards. So you can imagine it's complicated because the curriculum developer, we have the curriculum center, should try to translate these 4 standards to be one condensed and solid document. That's not easy. You have also to look at the teacher, the infrastructure, and so on. So that's the reality. So the question is, how we can manage this one? So we have the assessment system, but here is the issue. That is why we have multifaceted alignment. So it's not easy to align between all this. So we have more than 450,000 schools in madrasa. We have more than 3.4 million teachers here, Bu Yanti. We have more than 53 million students. That's one system. And we have national curriculum and 4 standards at the hand of the teachers. We have national assessment, and we have everything here. So how we integrate all this one? That is why I put the word multifaceted alignment. It's not easy. So implementing national standard curriculum and nationalized assessment pose several challenges in Indonesia. And teaching and learning take place in a whole system, which embrace classroom, school, and supra-system level of the ministry. We have provincial level, district level, sub-district level. In a good education system, of course, all these standard and policy at the supra-system level. Resource management at the institution level, at school or madrasa. And aspect of teaching and learning at the classroom level are tuned to support the quality student learning. That's ideally, that's the expectation. So a poor system, of course, is one in which all educational components are not aligned and tuned to support high quality teaching. So probably this is the homework for the ministry, whether we belong to either a good system or poor system in top of this alignment process. Or 90% alignment or only 30% alignment, that's, I think, the homework. Here is the challenge in terms of the alignment. At least the first one, we have to prevent misalignment between national curriculum and classroom instruction. That's very critical. We have teachers in Papua. They should understand what the document of this curriculum tell them to teach. And we have also the standard of learning process, and so on and so on. So they have to digest all these things. The second one between national curriculum and national assessment, national curriculum and textbook, there's another issue. National assessment and classroom assessment, classroom instruction and student learning, and classroom instruction and classroom assessment. So we have to align all this, but again, it is not easy. I try to see that the issue of misalignment probably is the hardest and the top issue in the context of education in Indonesia. Because if we cannot handle this issue of misalignment, this will give negative impact to the student in all school and madrasah, where they do not receive equal learning opportunities. That's the issue. And also valid and fair assessment. So if we don't have this kind of alignment, I think the ministry is giving something wrong to the people. So here is the, let's see. The first one here is we hope to see what are the alignment. The alignment at the horizontal level, we call horizontal at the same level, is at the macro level, we have the documents of the competency standard and the learning outcome of the curriculum. This document, of course, is given by the authority, but then the question is, does our life skill assessment, Bu Yanti is here, is aligned with our national curriculum, especially the spirit of our national curriculum. That's what I call macro level horizontal alignment. The ministry should answer this one. The second one is horizontal alignment at the classroom level. This is the question to the teachers. Whether the consistency of what the teacher teach in the classroom, what the student learn, and what the teacher assess in terms of the student learning are also in line. That's at the macro level. So there's two levels of horizontal questions. And if you look at this one, this is the homework for the ministry. So between Bu Yanti and the director of the curriculum should sit together and asking this question. Do we have this alignment? Do national assessment reflect what the expectation and the learning outcome stated in our curriculum? Of course, teacher will ask this one. You can add also textbook and learning resources. But at the vertical line, it is interesting, do we also work on this issue? Consistency between national curriculum as intended or prescribed curriculum with what actually teach, what the teacher teach at the classroom level. Again, under one system, it is hard. For the curriculum, as Pak Nino said yesterday, there's a massive now training through online system for this. There's another question for Yanti is the assessment vertical alignment. Do we have the consistency between our national assessment and classroom assessment? If not, then there's another question. So this is what I call multifaceted alignment. So it's not easy. It's better to work with the Australian system. Let them work on this all home component. Just give them the general idea. But in Indonesia, you have to go to this one national document per curriculum and one national assessment for learning. So here is the problem, and an issue of this misalignment, I think, should be raised by the minister and the ministry official and all educators in Indonesia. And we have to work very hard how to improve this alignment of the curriculum at the national level, textbook and learning resources, classroom instruction, student learning, and of course the classroom assessment. A lot of answers, many activities that we can do, but I think I want to emphasize these three things. Probably Bu Yanti can bring this to our colleague at the ministry. We have to work on what we call constructive alignment. The second one, you have to increase the assessment validity. And the last one is to develop the learning progression approach. So let's see for a while what we mean by constructive alignment. It's not new. John Big in 1990s, after the new era of competencies, and then assessment term came, and that in this around 1990s, he used the term constructive alignment. You remember there is a constructive learning theory in educational psychology. And there is another approach in curriculum development theories. So curriculum theories is relatively independent, developed by Ralph Tyler's, the Tylerian approach, and combined with the theory of constructive learning, bring together by Big to be the constructive alignment. Big observed at the time that in many educational practices in the world, there is often a misalignment between what teacher and authority expect students to learn, how the teacher teach, and how they assess student learning. So there is a mismatch, misalignment. And then he developed the constructive alignment to address this issue by ensuring that learning outcome, original term by Tyler is instructional objective. And then teaching methodology, pedagogies, and then assessment tasks are all aligned to support deep learning. So here is the two keywords that Big put what we call the constructive alignment. The first one, we have to use the constructive processes. I think what you have shared before me is related with this one. The first one is the constructive process is the idea that students should actively construct knowledge. Knowledge construction is very important. Through the engagement with learning activities, rather than passively receive it in remote or what you call non-meaningful learning. So here is one of the approach, and then the second one, he put the word alignment. The alignment is the coherence between learning objective or outcomes, teaching and learning activities, and assessment method. So Big used the word constructive from the theory of constructive learning, and then used the word alignment from the theory of Tyler approach to the curriculum development. So I think this will be one of the framework probably we can use to make sure that there is alignment between the curriculum, the learning, and then assessment. So as Big said, that constructive alignment occurs when the curriculum is stated in the form of clear objective. We have learning objective. Teaching methods are chosen that are likely to realize those objectives. And finally, assessment tasks should address this objective. That's as simple as that. But the problem is, in Indonesia, defining intended outcome is not easy. When I ask teacher, that's the hardest part. What are the difference between the new curriculum, emancipated curriculum, with curriculum 2013. For them, it's hard to read what we mean by this learning outcome. Because there is some terms used by the developer of this curriculum which have different meanings with the old curriculum. For example, the word instructional objective, the word exit competency, the word learning standard, performance standard, and then learning outcomes. What are all these differences? What are the differences between competency, instructional objective, learning objective, learning outcome, and so on? So it's not easy for the teachers. So make sure that you have the definition of the learning outcome at the very beginning, clear to everybody, clear to the minister, and clear to the teacher in Papua. Otherwise, I think it's hard for the alignment. So it should be somebody who can read this document from the central level of the ministry up to the school remote area in Papua. So consistency across Paris teaching method is not also key. The second one is the powerful role of assessment. I think we all understand that assessment is one of the most favorable factor influencing student learning. What teacher choose to include on the test and the type of question used on the test send a signal to students about what is important to study and whether they only need to memorize information or they have to apply the certain skill. So assessment is the signal to the teacher and signals to the student, including the external learning assessment. The National Life Skill Assessment will send this message too. So you have to always check this. Huyanti and all my colleagues from the ministry should check, do we have the assessment, national assessment, which has a very high curricular validity? For the teacher, whether this is, yes, it is also has a very high level of curricular validity, but also instructional validity. So the debate about this one either at the national level or teacher individually at the classroom level. And the last one is the learning progression. I think we have to think whether it is possible to implement this learning progression as a tool for multifaceted alignment. It could be a new proposal to the ministry. Can we change our national assessment to be assessment who monitor the progress of the student learning, or we still want to have this national assessment as system to monitor the system from school level, district level, provincial level, up to the state level. But the learning approach, I think, can help align the intended curriculum, because we can set this from the very beginning at the center level, life skill assessment, classroom instruction, and classroom assessment. So learning progression form the basis for creating horizontal coherence, alignment among curriculum, instruction, and learning, and also practical coherence. But the most important thing is, yesterday, Jeff, I think, illustrated about the importance of developmental coherence. So we have to make sure that this coherence will be there. Horizontal coherence, and then vertical coherence and developmental coherence. Developmental coherence, the curriculum should provide a systematic, sequential, and coherent route for both intellectual and personal growth. Your example is very good. Yeah. Otherwise, it is hard, again, to have the alignment of all these things. Yeah. So I think this should be the last one. Yeah. Research on learning progression, supporting the alignment, I think, a lot. I just give you one of the systematic review done by Jean et al. He said that the result of the literature review suggests the significant advances in enhancing development coherence using learning progression. More specifically, existing LPs have captured the mechanism of knowledge development, and integrated knowledge and practice in different ways. Regarding the horizontal coherence, while methodology for the development and validation of LP has been established, limited attention has been given to LP-based intervention and teacher understanding and use of it. So this is the homework. If you want to continue working on this one, in Indonesia, working on how a teacher can understand the LP system. So I think the evidence here, I think it's good to try to a little bit switch the approach of the assessment, not only to monitor the system, but to monitor the learning progress of the students. Again, LP can help enhancing horizontal and vertical coherence. Yeah, and I think that's all. So again, this is the homework for us in Indonesia. Yanti, can we take these three approaches to make sure that we can have the alignment of our national policies of the curriculum, large-scale assessment of Indonesia, and also at the classroom level. Thank you, and Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Dr. Bahrul. We have run out of time now, but I hope that our panelists will be available during our coffee break if you have some questions and would like to engage with them. We've heard some very interesting ideas and some challenges around aligning, multifaceted alignment of curriculum, learning and assessment. So can you please join with me to thank our distinguished panel, Professor Pauline Taylor-Guy, Pak Summer Xia, Dr. Claire Schooler, Dr. Jarrod Hingston and Dr. Bahrul Hayat. Thank you very much everyone for a fantastic presentation. And now I think we have a break for a 10-minute break for coffee, and then we'll start with the final symposia after our coffee break. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, convener and presenter. Please remain on stage for a while for a token of appreciation. And we would like to invite Dr. Weni Endahing Warni, Second Vice President of the Indonesian Psychometrics Association, to give the token to all presenters and convener of the symposium. Please stay on stage and maybe move to the front of the table, please. Okay, now the photo op. Please move to the center of the stage. Cameraman ready. Okay, in 3, 2, 1. Photo done. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Please return to your seat. And of course, we will take a short break. You may enjoy your coffee break served in the foyer area. Please return to this ballroom at 3:30 p.m. to continue on the series of activities of International Conference on Assessment and Learning. After this, you can choose to participate in either parallel breakout sessions where participants will present the studies that's been accepted through the scientific committees, peer review, or stay in the ballroom to participate in more symposium sessions. You may scan your barcode on your ID badge for more information about the breakout session. Please enjoy your break.